everyone, welcome back to the Library of Parthos. My name is Sarah, and today we are, of course, going to talk about books, but more specifically, I wanted to share something that I heard recently that was really cool before we get into the book that we're going to be talking about today. So recently, I got to listen to LeVar Burton speak. If you're not familiar with LeVar Burton, he's probably best known for hosting Reading Rainbow. You've probably got the theme song stuck in your head, and of course there's some other things that he is known for as well, but I think that's probably the most notable. Anyway, during his talk, one of the things that he said, I'm going to try to get this quote correct, is not every book is for everybody, but there is somebody for every book. I think I got that right. Basically saying that not everybody is going to enjoy every single book that is out there, but everybody can find a book that they enjoy. And I think that's one of the things that I just really love about reading, finding that one book that is for you. A couple of months ago, I did a video about books that made me fall in love with reading again. And I think it just really comes down to finding that one book that is for you and that one genre or trope or whatever it is, but finding what you enjoy, and then that is where the love of reading kind of develops from there. So I thought that was so cool, and it kind of ties into what we're talking about today, because I'm gonna be honest, this book was a little bit outside of my comfort zone. It's not a book that I tend to, it's not a topic or a trope, I guess, that I tend to gravitate toward, but I think you'll understand why I picked it up. Anyway, the book we're talking about today is Bride by Ali Hazelwood. If you've watched any of the videos I've done on Ali Hazelwood books in the past, you know that I am, I would say, a reluctant Ali Hazelwood fan, in that I read every book that she writes and then I complain about it afterwards. But recently I did discover that it's very formulaic, the way that she writes. So these stories follow a pattern, and just knowing that going into it has helped me just appreciate the stories for what they are. They are following this pattern. I know to expect that, and that's just the style that they are, and that's totally fine. So I have been a little more, I guess a little less hesitant, we'll say, when picking up her books. I do have her newer release sitting in a stack on the other side of the camera waiting to be read, but this book was quite different, actually. So it did not really follow that same formula as much as the other books have. The reason I say that this book is a little outside of my comfort zone is because it is about a vampire and a werewolf, and those are just not characters that I gravitate toward naturally. Do I read books with vampires and werewolves? Absolutely, because I love everything fantasy. However, I don't tend to gravitate towards those types of romance books specifically. Just not really my thing. Knowing that this was Ali Hazelwood, knowing how she writes, being familiar with the formula, let's say, I thought that I would give this book a shot, and I am so glad that I did, because it was very, very enjoyable. So we'll get into just a very quick spoiler-free summary. I'll share a little bit more in depth about the plot, and then I will wrap up with my overall thoughts on the book. So Bride is a book about Misery Lark. She's the main character. She's a vampire, and she's kind of been outcast from the vampire society. She doesn't really fit in. She's the daughter of like the lead councilman, kind of, but she still just doesn't really feel like she belongs. She has been kind of proposed with the idea of marrying the alpha of the local werewolf like chapter, to kind of create this truce, and for her own personal reasons, Misery does decide to go through with that marriage, and that leads to uncovering all of these secrets and Misery trying to kind of solve this puzzle that she is personally working through. So I think that's kind of it, spoiler free. So let's go ahead and get into a little more detail about the summary and some spoilers. Okay, so as I said, Misery is kind of outcast from the vampire society. And the reason for that is because she has been living her life as the collateral. And what that means is because relationships between humans and vampires have not been great throughout history, vampires view them very much as just like kind of like servants. To kind of maintain a somewhat working relationship, there is a child on each side. So there's a human and a vampire who are kind of swapped and raised in the opposite worlds so that they can kind of get an understanding for how the other side lives. And that's, I think, the like publicized intent of it, but essentially it's more of just like a hostage situation, right? Like, you're not gonna do anything because we have one of your people, we're not gonna do anything because we have one of your people, and like things can get messy on either side. So that has been Misery's job for the last several years. From the time she was a child until I think she was about 18, she was the collateral, living in the human world as a human. She did have one friend, Serena, that she was raised with because she was lonely, living, you know, an entire, like a life all on her own with caregivers, but in a human world where everyone is terrified of her. Like, yeah, she's lonely. So the solution to that is they kind of find another orphan girl named Serena and just decide, hey, you guys can be sisters or whatever. After her time as the collateral has kind of ended, Misery decides that she really doesn't want to go back to the vampire world because she has lived outside of it for so long, and really what is there for her there? So she stays in the human world. She works in IT, cybersecurity, all of those things, as she's just kind of trying to just live a comfortable life. Like, she's not even trying to like make a lot of money. She just wants to be able to live her life without being told what to do. So at that point, she's in her like mid to late 20s, I believe. I think she's about 27 during the events of the story. She is approached with kind of another deal as the collateral, and this deal is that she will marry the new alpha of this like local werewolf pack to create a truce. Couple of things about this. There's going to be a shift in power because there's a new governor, and the current governor is just really in like under the influence of the vampires. They are totally running the show. The new governor that's going to be taking office is wanting to negotiate evenly and try to really form peace between all of the organizations. So the vampires are fearful that this is going to lead to the werewolves getting more power, which they're bigger, they're I guess physically also their group is larger, so like that could really turn the tide for the vampires. So the solution is, let's form a truce similar to the whole collateral situation. We're gonna marry you off to the alpha, and then you'll be under their protection. They can't really move against us knowing that you're there, and it'll just make things a little bit easier. And the other thing is, this has happened before, and it was a complete bloodbath. Like, I don't think anybody walked out of the church. It was just horrific. So everyone's a little bit terrified that they're gonna go to this wedding that's supposed to bring them peace, and everyone's just going to kill each other. As I said in the spoiler-free summary portion, Misery has her own reasons for going through with this marriage, because she was kind of given a choice. I think they like presented it to her to see if she'd agree to it, and then probably would have just said like, you've got to do it anyway. But the reason that she wants to go through with this is because her best friend, Serena, that she's lived with since she was a child, is missing, and she has no idea what has happened to her. The only clue that she could find are initials, which happen to be the initials of the alpha. So she thinks that if she marries him, she can infiltrate this pack and find out what happened to her best friend. So the wedding goes down pretty much without a hitch. Like, everything's okay. You know, each side is a little bit hostile toward the other, but everyone survives, and Misery then leaves the human world, the vampire world, to live with this werewolf pack. Initially, when she gets there, she is not treated very well. The alpha, whose name is Lowe, kind of avoids her for the most part. The other werewolves are terrified of her, they hate her, and so she's not super comfortable there to begin with, but slowly she kind of gains the trust of a handful of people, especially Lowe's 6-year-old sister, Anna. She and Misery become fast friends, and Misery kind of gets used to the werewolves and this new life that she has until she is poisoned and almost killed multiple times. So things start to go a little bit south in terms of the relationships between the werewolf packs and the vampires. So a couple of different things happen. First of all, Misery is poisoned, and they know that the poison was meant specifically for her because she doesn't eat. Blood is just, you know, how she survives. However, growing up in the human world, she did kind of gain a taste for some specific foods, peanut butter being one of the things that she does enjoy, and so the peanut butter had been poisoned. So it was pretty clear that it was a direct attack on her. There is a kidnapping attempt on Anna, so Misery and the werewolves kind of thwart that attack and get a little bit of intel, and eventually Misery kind of comes clean to Lowe and explains, you know, I found your initials, or what I think are your initials, in my best friend's journal or planner or something, and I think that you have something to do with her disappearance. He is clueless as to what she's talking about, but decides that they can kind of work together to try to figure some things out. So, relations are kind of sticky between this werewolf pack and other packs because Lowe has just recently killed the alpha and kind of taken over. You know, throw Misery into the mix, that makes things a little bit complicated. And then, of course, Misery and Lowe are kind of fighting this attraction that they have for each other, knowing that, like, it's just not going to work no matter what. And toward the end of the book, you know, things are revealed as we go, and we find out the big bombshell is that Anna, Lowe's younger sister, is half human, half werewolf, which nobody thought was possible up to this point. But her father was a human, her mother was a werewolf. They've both been killed at the start of, like, before the start of the book. And so it's very important that she is protected and that nobody else finds out about this secret, because they might want to use her to their advantage, do some sort of testing on her. Like, things could just go very poorly very quickly if something were to happen to her. So Misery and Lowe continue investigating, trying to protect Anna, and eventually toward the end of the book, Misery is kidnapped, and when she kind of comes to, she's in an enclosed attic space with her best friend, Serena, and at that point, she, between talking to Serena and kind of putting all the pieces together, she realizes that Serena is also half human, half werewolf, and the reason that she had been kind of slowly disappearing over time and, like, acting really different was because she was struggling with this transformation. So she lived like 20 some years without any sort of, like, werewolf-ish traits coming out, and now suddenly she's turning on the full moon and all of these different things. If you've not read fantasy much, a very common thing is the idea of mates, especially when we're talking about werewolves. So werewolves have this, like, mate that they're, like, insanely attracted to, and it has a lot to do with, like, the smells and different things like that. And so Misery has been living this whole time as this, like, collateral bride, thinking that she was traded off to Lowe and that his mate, because there was a vampire sent, or I'm sorry, there was a werewolf sent to live with the vampires when they were married. She thinks that that was Lowe's mate who has been sent away, and so she's kind of, like, really upset that she had caused these two people to be apart, once she especially starts to understand, like, what all that entails, and then starts to feel really guilty when she realizes that she's starting to have feelings for Lowe. But then again, she starts to piece things together and realizes that maybe they might actually be mates instead. And Lowe denies that, most likely to protect her. Like, you know how those things go. So she's kidnapped with her best friend Serena. They try to escape, and they kind of, they're kind of, like, let escape, sort of. And then they're brought before her father, who kind of orchestrated this entire thing. So basically, again, to kind of hold on to what power they do, the leader of the vampire council, her father is trying to get to Anna. And so he kidnapped Misery, he kidnapped Serena, who he's been kind of, you know, trying to get to turn and figure out how all of that stuff works. And then he brings in Lowe in handcuffs, so obviously he's not there just because he wants to be there. And the whole plot is kind of revealed that he wants Lowe to give him Anna, or he's going to kill his own daughter, which is super cold. And Misery is like, you know, fine, whatever, it's not gonna make a difference. It's not like he actually cares about me. And her father's like, oh ho ho, no, that's not true. You guys are actually mates. What a shock. Nobody knew that. So Serena kind of has this like coded talk that she uses with Misery, and she's like, hey, remember how I couldn't do that thing for like a really long time, but then when I was like 25 I could do it? I'm gonna do that now. And so then Misery kind of in code talks to Lowe and is like, you know that thing that your sister can't do? Well, she could probably do it around now, and like you should do that too. Meaning like you guys shift into your werewolf forms and like let's get out of here. And so that's kind of what happens. Misery's father is killed. I believe he's killed. Yeah, he's killed. So then her brother becomes the leader, which is kind of like a whole little side story. Like he's slowly kind of trying to take over, and then he eventually does whenever their father is killed. And Misery decides that if it's okay, that she'll just go back with the pack, if Lowe will have her, if they'll accept her again. And of course they do. Everything's fine. Everyone's safe at the end of the story, and everyone gets their little happy ending. So that's pretty much it for Bride by Ali Hazelwood. To wrap it up, a couple of my thoughts about the story. First of all, I did not realize when I started that this was going to be a mafia type story, and I love a good mafia romance. So I was all about that as soon as this book started. The vampire werewolf thing, as I said before, not really my jam typically. Like I'll read books with them, but it's not something that I seek out. I don't think that this has like turned me into like a heavy vampire werewolf fan. I didn't mind it, but I also think that this could have been like just two people, and I still would have enjoyed the story just as much. Ali Hazelwood always does a really great job of like researching the field that her characters are in, because typically, right, she's writing these STEMinist main characters, and a lot of times it's very like technically, there's a lot of technical language. There wasn't as much technical language in this book. However, there were a lot of terms that I recognized having to do with like the cyber world, so I did appreciate those references in terms of the work that Misery was doing, and also then her investigation into her friend disappearing. So I really enjoyed this book. I would highly recommend it. One of the other things about Ali Hazelwood's work is that a lot of times there's like some sort of reveal at the end of the story, and it's usually like somebody was kind of thwarting the plans of the main character, and then she has to try to stop that or like tell the right people. And sometimes it's just like a little overkill, at least in my opinion. Like in one of the books, I think somebody was like holding a gun at one of the characters because he didn't want something to happen with the it seemed a little bit overkill. Being that this entire story was formed around this mystery of what happened to her friend and like who's after this little half werewolf half vampire girl, or I'm sorry, half werewolf half human girl, I think that the some of the suspense was a little bit better, and the build up at the end was totally worth it. So I did enjoy that much more in this book than in previous works of hers. But yeah, I definitely recommend it, especially if you're a fan of Ali Hazelwood. Check it out because it's a little bit different than that formula that we're used to. And if you're a fan of just like fantasy books, maybe straight up romance isn't your normal cup of tea, then this might work for you as well. If you've read it or if you're planning to read it, let me know your thoughts. I'd love to hear what everybody else thinks about the book. And that is the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.